The massive chamber stretched high above the gathered representatives, its crystal walls pulsing with soft light that shifted colors as different species spoke. 12 distinct alien races sat in a perfect circle, each delegation separated by force fields that maintained their preferred atmospheres. The air buzzed with the constant hum of universal translators working overtime to convert clicks, hisses, and musical tones into coherent speech. At the center of this grand assembly, a three-dimensional image rotated slowly in the air. It showed a small planet, mostly blue with swirls of white clouds and patches of green and brown. The star it orbited was nothing special, just another yellow dwarf among billions in the galaxy. Chancellor Vexter of the Vorthok Empire leaned forward on his 6 legs, his insect-like head tilting as he studied the display. His compound eyes reflected the blue light of the planet as his mandibles clicked together in what his species considered laughter. The sound was sharp and unpleasant, like breaking glass. Species designation: human, he announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. Planet designation: Earth, current technological level, primitive spaceflight, with fusion capabilities. Time since achieving radio technology: 200 standard galactic cycles. He paused, letting the information sink in before delivering what he clearly considered the most amusing part. Total interstellar communications detected in those 2 centuries: absolutely zero. The reaction was immediate. Ripples of what could only be described as laughter echoed from various species around the chamber, though each race expressed amusement differently. The Kelthani delegation, resembling giant praying mantises made of living metal, created a harmonious ringing sound by striking their limbs together. The representatives from the Helix Collective, a writhing mass of purple tentacles and glowing sensors, pulsed with bright bioluminescent patterns that flickered in rapid succession. Fascinating, commented Ambassador. This is of the Kelthani Dominion, her metallic voice carrying clearly despite her lack of vocal cords. 2 centuries of radio capability and not a single attempt at contact. Most species begin broadcasting within months of discovering electromagnetic communication. The Helix Collective spoke through a speaker system, as they communicated through chemical signals that other species couldn't interpret. Analysis suggests 3 possibilities. Their synthesized voice announced: first, they destroyed their civilization through warfare or environmental collapse. Second, they lack the intelligence to understand the significance of their discovery. Third, they are afraid. More laughter filled the chamber. The idea that any species might be afraid to reach out into the cosmos struck these galactic powers as particularly hilarious. Each of the races present had spent centuries conquering, enslaving, or eliminating other species. Fear was something they inspired, not something they understood. Chancellor Vexter raised one of his upper limbs for silence. The monitoring division has observed their planet for the past 50 cycles. They show no signs of global destruction. Their cities continue to grow, their population increases, and their technology advances at a steady pace. They have established permanent settlements on their moon and several mining operations in their asteroid belt. Then they are simply primitive, concluded Ambassador. This is unable to comprehend that they are not alone in the universe, or perhaps, suggested the representative from the Zephyrian Confederacy, a being that looked like a cross between a bird and a crystalline formation. They have already been observed by others and found wanting. Some species prefer isolation when they realize how outclassed they are. The discussion continued for several more minutes, with each delegation offering their theories about why this particular species had remained silent for so long. The consensus was clear: the humans of Earth were either dead, stupid, or cowardly. In any case, they posed no threat to galactic civilization. Chancellor Vextar called for order once again. The question before us today is simple. Earth's coordinates have remained classified due to standard protocols regarding developing species. However, given their apparent inability or unwillingness to join galactic society, I propose we declassify their location. The implications were clear to everyone present. Declassified worlds became fair game for resource extraction, colonization, or worse. It was how the galaxy worked. Species that couldn't or wouldn't defend themselves became prey for those who could. The vote was swift and unanimous. Not a single delegation raised an objection. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Director Kim Tae-ho watched the entire proceeding through sensors the aliens couldn't detect. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to their casual discussion of humanity's fate, though his dark eyes held a glint that might have worried the aliens if they could have seen it. Beside him, Dr. Park Seo-jin worked at a console, that looked far more advanced than anything the aliens suspected Earth possessed. Her fingers moved quickly across holographic interfaces, activating communication networks that spanned dozens of star systems. "The vote is complete," Tejo said quietly, watching as the council session ended and the various delegates began to disperse. "Earth is now declassified. We're officially open season." Sojin nodded, her expression grim but determined. 3 separate fleets are already moving: Kelthani, Warthog, and Helix forces, based on their current positions and standard travel speeds. Estimated time of arrival is 14 standard days. For the first time since the session began, Tejo allowed himself to smile. It was not a pleasant expression. "Perfect timing," he said, reaching for a secure communication device. "Signal Admiral Lee, tell him the waiting is over. The Great Silence ends exactly as we planned." As he spoke those words, systems throughout the solar system began to wake up. The deep space probe Magellan 3 drifted silently through the void, its sensors scanning the Kepler 442 system for signs of life. Commander Han Juwu floated in the cramped control room, watching the data streams with tired eyes. They had been traveling for 3 years to reach this distant star system, following radio signals that suggested intelligent life. What they found was beyond their worst nightmares. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Kim Do-yoon from her monitoring station, her voice tight with shock. "You need to see this." Ji-woo pushed himself across the zero-gravity compartment to her screen. The display showed Kepler 442b, a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. But something was terribly wrong. Massive ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities, hung in orbit around the planet like metal vultures. "Those aren't human ships," whispered engineer Park Hyun-woo, floating beside them. As they watched in horror, beams of energy lanced down from the alien vessels. Where they struck, the planet's surface turned to molten slag. Cities that had taken thousands of years to build vanished in seconds. The beautiful agricultural terraces that covered entire continents were being systematically destroyed. "They're mining the planet," Do-yoon said, her voice barely audible. "They're mining it with the people still on it." Ji-woo's hands clenched into fists as he watched the systematic destruction. The alien ships worked with terrible efficiency, strip mining the planet's resources while treating the indigenous population as nothing more than organic waste to be processed along with the ore. "Record everything," he ordered, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. "Every ship design, every weapon signature, every tactical formation. The galaxy needs to know what we're dealing with." The crew worked in grim silence for the next 6 hours, documenting the complete annihilation of an entire civilization. The beings who had built those cities, who had farmed those terraces, who had raised families and dreamed of the future, were all gone, processed into raw materials along with their world's mineral wealth. When it was over, Kepler 442b was nothing but a stripped, lifeless rock. The alien fleet departed as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving behind only devastation. The journey back to Earth took another 3 years. 3 years for the crew of the Magellan 3 to process what they had witnessed. 3 years to study the recorded data and realize just how outmatched humanity was. The alien weapons operated on principles that human science barely understood. Their ships were powered by technology that made Earth's best fusion drives look like steam engines. When they finally reached Earth, Ji-woo found himself standing before the Global Defense Consortium's emergency assembly. The room was packed with world leaders, military officials, and scientists. President Yoon Esiora sat at the head of the long table, her face grave as she listened to his report. "The species call themselves the Kelthani Dominion," Ji-woo explained, his voice hoarse from hours of testimony. "Based on their radio chatter, they've done this before. Many times, they view other civilizations as nothing more than resources to be harvested." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth had been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century, advertising their presence to anyone who might be listening. If the Kelthani found them, humanity would suffer the same fate as the farmers of Kepler-44b. President Yoon stood slowly, her decision already made. "We are not ready for this fight," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We have fusion drives and nuclear weapons. They have technology that can reshape matter itself. We have one world with 8 billion people. They have an empire that spans thousands of star systems." She paused, looking at each face around the table. "If we announce ourselves now, if we continue broadcasting into space, we become the next Kepler 442b. We become another entry in their harvest records." The vote was unanimous. Earth would go silent. Within weeks, all of humanity's radio transmissions into space ceased. The sudden silence was replaced by carefully crafted interference, patterns that mimicked natural stellar phenomena. To any alien observers, it would appear that Earth's electromagnetic signature was being disrupted by solar activity or cosmic radiation. But the silence was only the beginning. In secret facilities around the world, humanity's greatest minds began the work of centuries. Dr. Choi Minho, Earth's leading physicist, started research into technologies that existed only in theory. Engineer Kong Yoo-jin began designing spacecraft that could travel between stars without being detected. Hidden shipyards were constructed in the asteroid belt. Far from prying eyes, the first generation of truly advanced human technology took shape in the cold vacuum of space. Ships that could bend space-time itself, making them invisible to conventional sensors. Weapons that operated on principles that aliens had never encountered, and always, they watched. Secret observation posts were established throughout nearby star systems, their sensors focused on gathering intelligence about humanity's potential. Enemies they learned alien languages, studied their military tactics, and mapped their weaknesses. Years turned into decades. Decades turned into centuries. Earth remained silent, appearing to the galaxy as nothing more than a primitive world that had somehow lost its radio technology. The aliens dismissed humanity as another failed civilization, not worth their attention. They had no idea that in the darkness between stars, human colonies were spreading, that hidden fleets were building, that the species they had dismissed as primitive was preparing for the day when silence would end in fire. The watchers in the dark were patient. They had learned from Kepler-4 that patience was the difference between survival and extinction. The stars around Earth's solar system suddenly twisted and bent as three massive fleets tore through the fabric of space itself. The alien ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect military formation, their hulls gleaming with exotic metals and energy shields that flickered like soap bubbles around each vessel. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive Kelthani dreadnought that stretched 4 kilometers. His metallic limbs clicked against the control surfaces as he studied the primitive solar system spread out before him. Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel, seemingly defenseless and unaware of the doom approaching. Pathetic, he muttered, his synthesized voice carrying contempt. The only sign of space technology was a single small station orbiting the planet, barely larger than a Kelthani scout ship. 200 years of development, and this is all they managed to build. Behind him, his tactical officers prepared the standard invasion protocols. They had done this so many times before that it had become routine. First, biological weapons would sterilize the surface population. Then the mining ships would strip every useful resource from the planet. Finally, any survivors would be processed for whatever value they might have as slave labor. The Vorthok fleet took position on Earth's far side, their insect-like ships bristling with weapons designed to crack planets open like eggs. The Helix Collective's vessels moved with fluid grace, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with internal light as they prepared their own specialized tools of destruction. Begin standard sterilization protocols, Admiral Vextar commanded. Deploy biological agents first, then commence planetary harvesting operations. Deep beneath the bustling city of Seoul, in a command center that didn't officially exist, Admiral Lee Junki watched the alien positioning with calm satisfaction. The underground facility stretched for miles in every direction, filled with technology that would have amazed the aliens if they had known it existed. Perfect, he murmured, studying the tactical display that showed all three fleets exactly where humanity's war planners had predicted they would be. 2 centuries of preparation, and they're falling into our trap exactly as expected. The other officers in the command center worked quietly at their stations, their faces showing no fear despite the overwhelming alien forces above. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, just as their parents and grandparents had before them. All stations report ready, announced his communications officer, Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-jin. Lunar Base confirms Phase 1 preparations. Completely picked up his secure communicator, the device connecting him to systems throughout the solar system. Lunar Base, this is Sol Command. Begin Phase 1 activation. High above, in the vacuum of space, Earth's moon began to change. The familiar gray surface that had watched over humanity for millions of years started to shimmer and ripple like water. What the aliens had assumed was natural rock began to fold away, revealing the truth beneath. The moon wasn't just a moon anymore. It was the largest weapons platform ever constructed. Particle accelerators that could punch holes through planets emerged from hidden bays. Gravity manipulators capable of crushing entire fleets rose from concealed positions. Energy cannons that operated on principles the aliens had never encountered powered up with a hum that vibrated through space itself. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes widened in shock as his sensors finally registered what they were seeing. Impossible, he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. The scanning reports showed nothing but natural rock formations. Sir, his sensor operator called out, panic creeping into his voice. The asteroids throughout the system, they're not asteroids. One by one, what had appeared to be ordinary space rocks began their own transformation. Stealth fields that had hidden them for decades flickered and died, revealing the human fleet that had waited patiently in the darkness. Hundreds of ships, each one incorporating technology that shouldn't have existed, powered up their weapon systems. The human flagship Indomitable hung among them like a sleeping giant awakening. On its bridge, Dr. Beek Hyjin monitored the readings with cold satisfaction. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, developing weapons systems that operated on principles the aliens couldn't understand. Temporal displacement, fields online, she reported to Admiral Lee through their quantum communication link. Gravity weapons, charged and ready. Reality manipulation drives standing by. A new voice suddenly filled every communication channel used by the alien fleets. It spoke in perfect Kelthani, then switched to flawless Vorthok, then to the chemical sign language of the Helix Collective. Attention alien fleets, the voice said calmly. You came here expecting to find primitives. You were wrong. Admiral Vextar tried to respond, but his communications were being jammed by technology he couldn't identify. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations as their sensors reported impossible readings from every direction. You believe you have advanced technology, the human voice continued. You believe your weapons are superior. You believe your experience in conquest makes you invincible, but you are wrong about everything. The human ships began to move, their drives operating on principles that bent space-time itself. They didn't accelerate in the traditional sense. They simply relocated themselves through dimensions the aliens didn't know existed. For 200 years, we watched you, the voice explained. We studied your tactics, learned your languages, and mapped your weaknesses. While you laughed at our silence, we prepared for this day. Admiral Lee's voice carried clearly across all frequencies now, his words reaching every alien ship simultaneously. You want to know why Earth was silent? Because we were listening, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to show you what real technology looks like. The transformation was complete. What had appeared to be a defenseless solar system was revealed as the most heavily fortified position in the galaxy. Every moon, every asteroid, every piece of space debris was actually a weapon waiting to be activated. Fire at will, Admiral Lee commanded. Show them why Earth was silent. The first human weapon fired at exactly 1423 Earth Standard Time. Captain Oh Sungmin watched from the bridge of his destroyer Retribution as a torpedo that shouldn't have been possible left his ship's launch tube. The weapon didn't travel through normal space. Instead, it existed in 17 different dimensions at once, making it impossible to track or intercept. Admiral Vextar screamed orders at his crew as the strange torpedo approached his flagship. Full shields, all power to defensive systems, but his matter-phase shields, which had protected Kelthani ships for centuries, might as well have been made of paper. The torpedo struck, and the massive dreadnought simply stopped existing. Not exploded, not destroyed, but erased from reality, as if it had never been built in the first place. Where a kilometer-long warship had been moments before, there was now only empty space. What kind of weapon was that? Whispered Captain O's tactical officer, Lieutenant Park Jae-soon, staring at the empty void where the enemy flagship had been. The kind that makes sure they never threaten anyone again. Oh replied grimly, already targeting his next shot. Throughout the solar system, the pattern repeated itself. Human weapons operated on principles that broke every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. The Vorthok fleet tried to escape using their quantum tunnel drives, technology that allowed them to jump instantly from one point in space to another, but the human gravity manipulators had folded space-time into impossible shapes, creating maze-like gravity wells that trapped the alien ships no matter which direction they tried to flee. Commander Vises of the Vorthok Third Fleet watched in horror as her escape routes collapsed one by one. Her ships were caught like insects in a web made of twisted space-time. Every time her navigators tried to plot a jump, they found their path blocked by gravitational anomalies that shouldn't have been possible. Engineering, she called desperately. Can we break free of these gravity fields? Negative, Commander, came the reply. The humans have somehow folded space into a pattern our computers can't calculate. We're trapped. The Helix Collective fared no better. Their biomechanical ships tried to adapt to the human weapons by evolving new defensive systems in real time, a ability that had saved them in countless battles. But how do you evolve a defense against weapons that attack you in dimensions you don't even know exist? The collective mind of the Helix ships screamed in confusion as human particle beams passed through their adaptive armor as if it wasn't there. The beams targeted the quantum structure of matter itself, unmaking the very atoms that composed their hulls. Dr. Bikai Jin watched the battle from her position aboard the Indomitable, feeling a cold satisfaction as centuries of preparation paid off. Temporal displacement torpedoes away, she reported to Admiral Lee. Target, Helix Formation 7 through 12. The torpedoes didn't just destroy their targets, they displaced them backwards in time by several seconds, causing the alien ships to collide with their own past selves in a cascade of temporal paradoxes that reduced them to quantum foam. But even as the alien fleets died around them, the human heirs were working with surgical precision. Every time an enemy ship was about to be destroyed, invisible data mining systems stripped its computers clean. Navigation charts showing the locations of alien worlds, military communications revealing fleet positions, government databases containing centuries of records, all of it was copied and transmitted back to Earth in the milliseconds before each ship ceased to exist. The battle lasted exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, not a single alien vessel remained. 3 of the galaxy's most powerful fleets had been completely annihilated without causing even minor damage to a single human ship. In the depths of what had once been called Cheyenne Mountain, Director Kim Tae-ho sat in the command center that was finally revealed to be Earth's true military headquarters. The facility stretched for miles underground, its walls lined with technology that made the alien fleets look primitive by comparison. Dr. Park Sojin floated beside him in zero gravity, her face pale as she studied the vast database they had captured from the alien ships. The intelligence windfall was beyond anything they had hoped for, but the information it contained was horrifying. The Kelthani Dominion alone has destroyed over 800 civilizations, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vorthok Empire claims credit for 1,200 more, and the Helix Collective has consumed nearly 2,000 species over the past millennium. Taeho's weathered face remained calm, but his eyes burned with cold anger. 3,000 civilizations, 3,000 entire species wiped out by these creatures. Sojin scrolled through more data, her hands shaking slightly. And according to their planning documents, we were supposed to be number 3001. They had already divided up our solar system between them. The Kelthani wanted our minerals, the Vorthok claimed our biological resources, and the Helix planned to absorb our entire population into their collective. Taeho stood slowly, his decision already made. He walked to the quantum communicator that connected Earth to human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems, colonies the aliens had never suspected existed. Admiral Lee, he said into the device, activate all strike fleets. Authorization code Kepler 442 Memorial. Across the galaxy, in the cold darkness between distant stars, human ships that had waited patiently for decades suddenly came to life. These weren't the defense fleets that had just destroyed the alien forces at Earth. These were the hunter-killer groups, designed for a single purpose, to make sure the galaxy's predators could never threaten anyone again. The activation message was simple and direct. Target coordinates for every alien military base, every government center, every fleet anchorage in known space. And with it, a single word that had been waiting 2 centuries to be spoken. Execute. The war for the galaxy's future had begun. The screens across the galaxy lit up at the same moment. Every communication device, every entertainment system, every government broadcast network suddenly displayed the same message in hundreds of different languages. The transmission came from Earth, but it wasn't what anyone expected. On the Kelthani homeworld of Zerion Prime, citizens gathered around public displays as documents they had never seen before filled their screens. Military reports, government communications, and classified files that their leaders had kept secret for centuries. A young Kelthani worker named Zixtal read about something called Operation Harvest Moon and felt her metallic limbs begin to shake. The document described how Kelthani forces had attacked a peaceful farming world called Kepler 442b. But this wasn't the glorious victory their government had told them about. The report showed pictures of children running from mining beams, of families being processed alongside mineral ore, of an entire civilization destroyed in 6 hours for their planet's resources. "This can't be real," she whispered, but more documents kept appearing, hundreds of worlds, thousands of species, all destroyed by the military she had been taught to respect and honor. Across the galaxy on Vorthok Station 7, Commander Vizak stared at his personal screen in growing horror. The files showed medical experiments conducted on his own people, Vorthok soldiers exposed to biological weapons without their knowledge, civilians used as test subjects for new diseases, children taken from their families for genetic research. The worst part was seeing his own name on the lists. He had been dosed with experimental combat drugs during his training 20 years ago. The memory problems he had been experiencing, the strange headaches, the way his mandibles sometimes clicked uncontrollably. It was all because his own government had used him as a test subject. In the floating cities of the Helix Collective, individual minds that had been joined together for decades suddenly remembered things they had been forced to forget. Before they became part of the collective, they had been separate beings with their own thoughts and dreams. The unity they had been told was voluntary had actually been forced on them through brain surgery and chemical control. A being who barely remembered being called Fluxenda felt tears forming in eyes she had forgotten she owned. She remembered a mate, children, a life that had been taken from her when the collective absorbed her homeworld. The glorious joining had been nothing more than the destruction of billions of individual souls. The broadcasts continued for hours. Every war, crime, every covered-up massacre, every lie told to justify genocide was revealed in perfect detail. The data that Humaneas had stolen from the destroyed fleets contained centuries of classified information, and now all of it was being shared with the galaxy. On Earth, President Lim Hae-won stood in the rebuilt United Nations building, speaking. 2 cameras that would carry her words to every inhabited world in known space. Behind her, through the great windows, Earth turned slowly in space, its blue surface no longer hidden from the galaxy's view. "We are humanity," she said, her voice calm and steady. "For 200 years, we have watched you from the shadows. We learned your languages so we could understand your communications. We studied your cultures so we could know who you really were. And we witnessed your crimes so we could judge what kind of galaxy we were living in." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "We chose silence not because we were afraid of you, but because we were wise enough to know that announcing ourselves too early would have made us just another entry in your harvest records." The response from across the galaxy was immediate and chaotic. Some alien governments tried to launch desperate attacks against Earth, sending whatever military forces they had left toward the human homeworld. But their weapons never reached their targets. Human defensive systems that existed in multiple dimensions at once intercepted every missile, every energy beam, every kinetic projectile before they could threaten Earth. Other governments tried to maintain control over their populations as revolutions broke out on world after world. But how do you control people who now know the truth about everything you've done? How do you justify genocide when the evidence is displayed on every screen in your empire? A few wise leaders sent messages of surrender to Earth, begging for mercy, and offering to cooperate with whatever humanity demanded. These were mostly younger governments or species that had been forced to join the galactic powers against their will. In his laboratory on Earth, Dr. Choi Minho, now over 150 years old but kept alive by advanced medical technology, addressed what remained of the Galactic Council. Most of the original members were dead or in hiding, but a few desperate representatives still tried to maintain their authority. "We offer you a simple choice," he said, his ancient voice still strong. "You can join us in building a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on actual morality and respect for all life. Or you can continue down your current path and face the consequences." The consequences weren't death. Humanity had learned that making martyrs of evil leaders often made their followers fight harder. Instead, the consequences were complete exposure. Every secret revealed, every crime broadcast, every lie stripped away until nothing remained but truth. As the weeks passed, alien civilizations began to collapse from within. Some worlds embraced the chance for real change, throwing out their old leaders and asking humanity for help in building better societies. Others descended into chaos as their populations learned what had been done in their names. On Lunar Base, engineer Kang Yu-jin, now the oldest human alive at 198 years old, stood at an observation window watching Earth's communication array's power. Up for the first time in 2 centuries, the great transmitters that had been silent for so long began broadcasting openly into space. For the first time since 2157, humanity was speaking to the stars, and across the galaxy, everyone was listening. With respectful silence,